Miyamoto Musashi and Sasaki Kojiro were two samurai about to have the duel of the century. Musashi wasn't your typical samurai. He was the type of person who thrived on chaos and slept like a baby after destroying someone's honor. An absolute mad lad, you could say. Kojiro, on the other hand, was a fan favorite. Charismatic, competent, and the type of dude who would win best hair in the samurai yearbook. For years, the two would circle each other like roosters in a barnyard until they decided, let's just do this, and a fight was scheduled for April 13th, 1612. The venue? Ganryu-jima, a remote island. Obvious choice for a dramatic sword fight. So Kojiro arrived bright and early, glittering sword in hand, ready to fight like a professional. And Musashi? Musashi was late by many hours. My man left Kojiro pacing up and down, thinking, is this guy really ghosting me? But then, he got there. And he didn't arrive with a conventional katana, as anyone reasonable would. Nah, that wouldn't be iconic enough. He walked up with a wooden sword that he'd carved out of an oar during his boat journey over. You gotta appreciate the sheer boldness. Kojiro, who was understandably irritated, used his nodachi, his extra-long sword. They got into position and the fight began. As soon as it started, Kojiro went straight for his famous move, the swallow cut, which was so quick and perfect that it was almost like a myth among samurai. But Musashi pretty much said, nice try, little bro, and easily dodged it. And before Kojiro could recover, Musashi swung his wooden stick, sword, and delivered a single crushing hit to his skull. Game over. Kojiro, the living legend, had fallen. And Musashi didn't just win the duel, he destroyed Kojiro's entire reputation. It was like rolling up to a basketball game with a beach ball and dunking on LeBron. But wait, there's more. Musashi wasn't the kind of guy to wait around for uncomfortable post-duel talks, so he immediately returned to his boat and began rowing away like a man with a plan. Kojiro's admirers, yeah, he had groupies, samurai stands were apparently a thing, were enraged and went after Musashi, but they couldn't catch him. And that, my friends, is how Miyamoto Musashi established his legacy as not just a brilliant swordsman, but the ultimate troll. Next up, we got a fight between elephants. In 1593, there was a king named Narejuin, who woke up and, like many leaders of his time, figured that talking things out was not the best way to do things. Why discuss issues when you can resolve conflicts with a duel on top of war elephants? Theoretically, of course. That morning, as the sun came up over his camp, Narejuin probably stretched, yawned, and wondered, what should I do today? Breakfast? Nah. Writing history with the tears of my enemies? Definitely. He chose violence, as people often did during medieval times. Back then, Thailand, known as Ayutthaya, and Burma were like neighbors who just couldn't stop arguing over their boundaries. King Narejuan, a source of pride for Thailand, was more than just a king, he was a remarkable figure of the medieval era. Smart planner? Check. Strong fighter? Check. Owner of the greatest war elephants? Correct. Coolest king ever, not gonna lie. At the same time, his rival, Crown Prince Mingyi Swa of Burma, was relaxing under a tree in the battlefield. He wasn't really being lazy, it was more of a smart, let's avoid getting trampled by elephants right now kind of pause. But Narejuan had a bit of a different perspective. When he saw Swa looking a bit too comfortable, he snapped. What's this guy up to, he probably said to himself, going on a holiday during a war? And amid the confusion, he then yelled with the confidence of someone who has never given up. Hey brother, why are you sitting under that tree, as if you were afraid of the sun? Why don't you step out here and face me one-on-one like a true man? And let's take a moment to think about Mingyi Swa's situation. There he was, just trying to get through the day without any trouble, when out of nowhere, the king of Thailand pointed him out in front of everyone. Peer pressure is a real thing, and back in medieval times, refusing a challenge like that was pretty much the end of your social life. So instead of taking the smart route, which would have been to run away, Swa got on his elephant, mumbled something like, this is either gonna make me famous or kill me. And then they got ready to duel. On one side, there was Narejuan, shining with a strong presence. Meanwhile, Mingyi Swa is likely thinking about why he didn't take a sick day that day. The battle was a mess, but everyone paused to see the fight on elephant back, because who could resist? And honestly, the fight itself was pretty anticlimactic. Narejuan, with the skill of someone who'd done this many times before, took down Mingyi Swa in one smooth strike. According to legend, the strike was so strong that it not only finished the battle, but also crushed Burmese hopes of taking control of Ayutthaya forever. Mingi Swa, that unfortunate fellow, really had no opportunity. One moment he was a prince with dreams, and the next he became a warning about why you shouldn't go against King Narejuan. The battle ended with the Burmese army pulling back and Narejuan standing happy, probably surveying the scene to say who's next. But nobody was brave enough to step forwards, because how can you outdo an elephant duel? Anyway, moving on. Okay, we're going to talk about Jean de Carouge versus Jacques Legris. Now, Jean wasn't your typical knight. He was the type of man who got up every morning and decided, today I will fight someone. And Jacques, on the other hand, was his frenemy turned arch nemesis, because medieval conflicts had no chill. The beef? Well, it was personal. Jean accused Jacques of assaulting his wife Marguerite, which was not only a severe allegation, but also one which might completely cook his life. But rather than relying on evidence or boring old court processes, Jean went full Game of Thrones mode and demanded a trial by battle. Because clearly, beating up someone in front of a crowd is the most effective method to demonstrate your wife's honor. A big audience gathered. Everyone was fired up because they were attending a legit medieval UFC match. The French monarch himself showed up, observing from the VIP area. The stakes were, if Jean lost, Marguerite would be burned at the stake for false accusations, which is just crazy. So, no pressure. The conflict itself was utter medieval lunacy. This was more than just a brief sword fight. Nah, these two fought with a complete medieval armory. I'm talking lances, battle axes, swords, and daggers. Yup. First, they charged each other with lances, because of course they did. Why not start big? And when that didn't work, they switched to war axes, smashing and clanging like two people competing in the blacksmith Olympics. Then came the swords. Sparks flew, the crowd cheered, and neither man backed down. Jacques, despite being the accused, battled as if his life depended on it, because, well, it kinda did. And Jean battled even harder, motivated by fury, honor, and probably fear of his wife's approaching death. They eventually ended up tumbling on the ground, fighting like two enraged toddlers who discovered that there was just one cookie left. And the great finale, Jean, in an action movie style move, gained the upper hand and stabbed Jacques to death. The audience went friggin' bananas. Jean emerged triumphant, bruised but undamaged. But Jacques suffered the ultimate defeat, one that would forever mark him as a monster in the history books. Marguerite's name was cleared, and Jean was awarded the Husband of the Year award, Medieval Edition. She became a living legend, with her dignity restored and her story remembered as one of the most dramatic events in French history. Jacques, on the other hand, didn't have a happy ending. Only a cemetery and a lot of side-eye from history's writers. So yeah, that was an absolutely insane duel. Andrew Jackson versus Charles Dickinson. Let's go back in time to 1806. A simpler time, when the best way to settle a dispute was not through Twitter drama or courtroom, but by a traditional gun duel. And no one represented the I don't have time for your nonsense intensity more than Andrew Jackson. You might remember him as the 7th President of the United States. But before that, he was a hot-headed guy with a strong sense of honor, a questionable temper, and not at all chill about insulting his wife. Our story begins with Charles Dickinson, who clearly lacked self-preservation instincts. After some drama over a wager, since betting on horses was the thing to do back then, Dickinson decided to insult Andrew Jackson's wife, Rachel. Big mistake. If there's one thing you didn't do in the 19th century, it was to stir up conflict among someone's family members. But Dickinson went there, and Jackson was not going to let it slip. Jackson challenged Dickinson to a duel, because that was clearly how mature people settled disputes in 1806. Pistols at dawn? Yes, please. The duel was scheduled for May 30th, 1806, in a peaceful field in Kentucky. Jackson arrived with his trademark intensity, like he'd already decided that death was an option for him that day. Dickinson, secure in his shooting abilities, was eager to conclude things soon. Spoiler, that may not be exactly what happened. So here's how everything went down. The duel started and Dickinson shot first, and boy did he deliver. His gunshot hit Jackson square in the chest. Most people would consider that the end of the story. But Andrew Jackson was not most people. The man just stood there, bleeding, like being shot was just an inconvenience. Jackson clutched his chest and glared at Dickinson. That's all you got? Now it was Jackson's turn. He lifted his revolver and took aim, calmly, like he wasn't already bleeding out. But here's the thing, Jackson wasn't exactly famed for his accuracy. In reality, the gun has a history of misfiring, which is the very last thing you want in a duel. But not that day. That day, fate was on his side. He fired and the bullet hit Dickinson. It was game over for Charles. Dickinson died from his injuries, but what about Jackson? Well, he walked or limped away a winner, carrying the bullet in his chest for the rest of his days. Later in life, when he became president, many people reflected on this event. He wasn't just a politician, he was a man who took a bullet, murdered his opponent, and then went about his business.